What's that? It's a fire alarm! Come on! Come on! Everything together! Come on! Come on! Get over together! Come on!
Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and Strixhaven has officially arrived. Applause, applause. Well, see, in spoiler season, we were looking at the cards, and we weren't too excited about it, but I can say after playtesting and brewing with a whole bunch of ideas, there's a lot of broken stuff going on, and more importantly, it puts Eldraine in its place without being more broken than Eldraine. I don't know how those two things are possible, but it's incredibly important in order for the format to be healthy moving forward, so I'm all about it. This deck in particular is called JESKAI Fire Drill, and there's a reason for that. We're leveraging School, aka Learn and Lesson. We're leveraging Flamethrowers. It's a little card called Flamethrower Sonata. First card that really stuck out to me in spoiler season. It's basically a one-turn Narset of the Ancient Way down tick, and it's crazy. But the synergy we're able to generate here with a bunch of the new cards, combined with a bunch of the old cards, which we'll get to, is crazy. So before we dive in, make sure and subscribe, help the channel grow. Give this video a like so that the algorithms like me on YouTube, so they say, hey, let's show this to people, and maybe they'll care, or maybe not. I don't know. But I will say this, if we can get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll commit to another video every day. A new video every single day of the week. And that's kind of crazy. We need to hit 1,000 to get there. But we're growing fast, so every little bit counts. Like, subscribe, share. Let's jump into it. Listen. This deck is bananas, just plain bananas. So the core of the deck, first of all, is Narset of the Ancient Way. Now, this is not a Strixhaven card, right? This is a card that we saw come out in Ikoria, but it's incredibly powerful. Upticks to gain you life or to generate mana, downticks to draw a card and then discard a card, or rather you can choose to discard a card, and deal damage equal to that card's casting cost to any target. And then it's also got an ultimate. You can -6 make an emblem so that anytime you cast a non-creature spell, you'll deal 2 damage to any target you want. Absolutely versatile, insanely powerful. Now, we're pairing this with Flamethrower Sonata. Flamethrower Sonata is a new card in Strixhaven, and as soon as we saw it, our mind immediately went to Narset. So this is the backside of Torrent Sculptor, but we're going to talk about the backside first because it's the reason that the card's in the deck. So Flamethrower Sonata, 2 mana sorcery, discard a card, then draw a card. When you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, Flamethrower Sonata deals damage equal to that card's mana value to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Now, this is incredibly important. Unlike Narset, you have to discard an instant or sorcery, not just any card, right? So, but that's okay, because we can choose to kind of save the instants and sorceries that we have in the deck for Flamethrower Sonata and prioritize that, and then maybe prioritize discarding other things we can't discard to Flamethrower Sonata with Narset. But a lot of times we're going to have plenty of instant sorceries that we can discard to either, and both are incredibly powerful. And the important thing to note here too is both are letting you draw another card, right? With Narset, you can choose to keep it and not kill something, which is a little bit better. But with Flamethrower Sonata, you're able to hit something on turn 2, which is incredibly, incredibly important. Having turn 2 removal when you need it, especially removal that can hit something really powerful. If they're on the play and they drop, you know, turn 3 Questing Beast, or turn 4 Questing Beast, or turn 3 Lovestruck Beast, and then you can untap and Flamethrower Sonata, it's pretty insane. So Flamethrower Sonata, incredibly powerful, cycles cards, and then it also, just like Narset, ends up putting a card in your graveyard. So if we're discarding big instants or sorceries to Flamethrower Sonata and Narset, Then we're able to activate our next goodie from Strixhaven, which is Draconic Intervention. This is essentially a 4-mana sweeper. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you have to exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, and then it deals X damage to each non-dragon creature, where X is the exiled card's mana value. Important to note, if a creature dealt damage this way would die, exile it instead. So we have a sweeper that exiles everything that dies, which is incredibly important in the new meta. If you've been playing in Arena lately and you've come up against the Witherbloom decks, you'll know why. Tons of pests, tons of triggers from things dying and gaining value, not to mention things that have always been gaining value from dying and go to the graveyard, things like Kroxa and other escape creatures. There's a lot of value to be had from things dying these days, so a sweeper that's only 4 mana, that just exiles everything, is nuts. And then on top of that, it dodges our win condition, right? Or I should say, rather, our win condition dodges the Draconic Intervention because we're running 4 copies of Goldspan Dragon. Now, it's no surprise that Goldspan Dragon is insanely powerful. We saw that all last season when Kaldheim came out. But it's even better in a deck like this, right? We can completely one-side Wrath their entire side of the board and keep our dragons and still be swinging in, right? Absolutely insane. Exile all their creatures. Goldspan Dragon, when it hits, is going to be making treasures. And those treasures are even more important in a deck like this because they ramp us to be able to cast our high drop spells a lot quicker. So before we get to the high casting cost spells, let's continue going over the 4 drops here. We've also got 2 Mythos of Vadrok. Now, this is essentially our 5th and 6th copy of a sweeper. It's not actually a sweeper, right? In that it only does 5 damage divided as we choose among any number of target creatures and or players. But for all intents and purposes, it is. When you're up against an aggro deck, you can kill multiple creatures with this, 2, 3, sometimes 4 creatures with this one spell. And also, since we're running all Jeskai colors, even if we don't kill something, being able to kill 1 or 2 creatures and then also lock down their planeswalker or lock down their big creature that we can't quite kill yet so that we have another turn to get there is incredibly powerful. So as the 5th and 6th copy of our sweeper, essentially, very powerful spell, right? It's also the other thing we can use white for. This is basically a Prismari / Izzet deck with just a splash of white for Narset and Mythos. But incredibly powerful, so it's definitely worth the splash. Also, the other side of Flamethrower Sonata is Torrent Sculptor, and Torrent Sculptor is actually way better than I thought it would be. 2/2, Ward 2, which means it essentially has hexproof unless the opponent pays an extra 2 mana. It's for 4 mana, and when it enters the battlefield, you can exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to put a number of +1/+1 counters on Torrent Sculptor equal to half that card's mana value rounded up. Now, in this deck, we have a ton of high-cost mana value cards, so a lot of times Torrent Sculptor is coming down as a 6/6 for 4 mana with Ward 2, which is nuts. And what's great about Ward is they have to spend the mana on the ward before you decide whether their spell resolves. So they could cast something to try to remove your dragon, for example, or your Torrent Sculptor with Ward. If it hits your dragon, you get a treasure. If it hits your Torrent Sculptor, they have to pay the 2. And then after that happens, we can use cards like Saw It Coming or Divide by 0 to counter the spell. So let's get to our cheap plays. Now, this is a Keruga deck. Because we're playing all high casting cost spells, and because we want to maximize the number of high casting cost spells in the deck, to make sure we have good things to discard to Flamethrower Sonata and Narset, to make sure we have good things to exile to Draconic Intervention to do a ton of damage to the board, we want to double down on expensive stuff, which means we're able to run something like Keruga without giving up as much, without as much of an opportunity cost, right? So we want to maximize the value we can get out of Keruga, which means we're trying to run cards that cost more than 2, but we can still use on turn 2 if we need to. So we've got 4 Bonecrusher Giant, which is a staple of any red deck, right? But it's especially good here. We can stomp on turn 2 if we need to kill something. with a card that's not actually a 2 casting cost card. Therefore, it can be run with Keruga. And then we've also got the Bonecrusher Giant itself that we can play on turn 3 and use as a big blocker if we're against aggro. Incredibly versatile card. Then we have Saw It Coming, where turn 2 is not a dead turn for us with Saw It Coming, because on turn 2 we can foretell it, and then it's always in exile ready to counter something for only 2 mana, even though we're playing a Keruga deck that only lets us play things that cost 3 or more. So that's pretty cool. And then we've got Divide by 0. Now, Divide by 0 is 3 mana, return target spell or permanent with mana value 1 or greater to its owner's hand, and then learn. So the downside of this card is it costs 1 more mana than cards like this would normally cost, and you can't bounce tokens with it. But the upside is you can counter a spell and return it to their hand, or return a permanent to their hand. And as long as they don't have the mana to replay the thing, you can gain a ton of tempo advantage. And the one downside usually to a card like this, where you're gaining a bunch of tempo advantage, is the fact that you're usually losing card advantage to do it, right? You're usually wasting the card, but they still kind of have the card to play later. In this case, you get the tempo advantage of stopping their big play or returning their big thing to their hand, but then you also get to learn. And what's beautiful about the lesson board for us, or I'll call it school board, I know, I'm awesome. Anyway, what's great is the number one worry with lessons is that they don't do enough for their cost, right? They're super underpowered and overcosted spells because you're casting a learn spell first, right? So it's supposed to balance it out. But if we're just looking to pitch things to Narset and Flamethrower Sonata, it doesn't matter what the spell does. We're just getting a free card from the sideboard so that we can discard it for its cost. That's all that matters. So we can grab something like Mascot Exhibition, which is a 7 mana lesson that creates a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying, a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token, and a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So if we're in the late game, we can just cast this and go wide, and it's a ton of value. But if we're in the mid game and we just need to discard something to Narset or Torrent Sculptor, we just get a free card from our sideboard. And we don't have to waste one of the cards in our deck that we're drawing into. We can just discard the thing that we found with Learn and do 7 damage to something. And then Mascot Exhibition's in our graveyard, and we can exile it with Draconic Intervention to do 7 to the whole board. So insanely powerful. We're really abusing the learn and lesson mechanic here by making the fact that they are overcosted, underpowered spells not a downside for us. In fact, the fact that they're overcosted is an upside because we get to do more damage to things with Narset and Flamethrower Sonata and Draconic Intervention. So it's just absolutely nutty. The rest of the lesson board is Introduction to Annihilation, because it's another reasonably high-costed thing we can discard, but it's also targeted removal that can get rid of any permanent if we're in a bind, right? Elemental Summoning if we just need to put more threats on the board. Start from Scratch is amazing if we want to destroy an Embercleave or a Great Henge or any other kind of problematic artifact, but it can also do 1 damage to any target. So if they have a Speaker of the Heavens or a Fervent Champion or any kind of 1 toughness creature that is a real headache, we can just get rid of it. Absolutely cool. Teachings of the Archaics is a card we can grab usually if we're against a deck like a Yorion deck that is trying to go over the top with value. We can use a card like this to catch up because it draws us 2 cards if they have more cards in hand. It draws us 3 cards if they have 4 more cards in hand. So if we fall behind and they're just going way over our head with value, which Yorion decks normally do, we can just fetch this and actually catch up. And a lot of the spells in our deck are worth a ton. So we're drawing into insane value with whatever we draw into with this. So we can absolutely catch up to a Yorion deck. And then we've also got Reduce to Memory, because this is another way we can exile a non-land permanent. We need to have the 2 white, and with white being a splash, that's a little bit harder. But it's also costs less. It only costs 3 mana instead of 5. So depending on the situation, we can either grab to Reduce to Memory or Introduction to Annihilation to deal with any problematic permanent. But if we know we're going to sweep next turn with Draconic Intervention, it's way better to grab Reduce to Memory, exile their problematic permanent, and then on our turn untap and Draconic Intervention and just sweep the board and get rid of the creature they got with it anyway. So that's super cool. Being able to run Keruga in this deck is obviously pretty amazing because we've got not a ton of permanents, but enough, right? So because we're trying to emphasize spells in this deck, instants and sorceries, we're not running as many permanents as we would normally want to run with something like Keruga, but it's kind of free, right? Because I was saying earlier that we're trying to focus on really high casting cost spells, Keruga is almost free because you almost don't want to be running 2-drops anyway. So getting there by playing stuff like Bonecrusher Giant, Saw It Coming, Flamethrower Sonata, I think is really clever and super worth it. And then we have our really expensive spells at the top end. And this is where the deck also continues to get really clever, right? So we've got, first of all, 4 Boon of the Wishgiver. Now, early on, we can cycle this for 1 to hopefully draw into land that we need to make sure we're curving out, which is incredibly important in a deck like this. I tried a version of this deck without Boon of the Wishgiver, and we were just coming up a little bit short as far as being able to curve out the way we want, right? So being able to cycle early with Boon of the Wishgiver, make sure we get our land drops is incredibly important. And then in the mid game, we can discard it to Flamethrower Sonata or to Narset to do a ton of damage to something. We can remove it with Draconic Intervention to do damage to the whole board. In the late game, we can actually just cast it for 6 mana and draw 4 cards and fill back up. So incredibly versatile to have this in the deck, and I think it's an absolute auto include for sure. And then we have 4 copies of Emeria's Call, 4 copies of Seagate Restoration. Crazy in this deck because we don't actually mind that these are 7-drop spells because we're usually not casting them, right? This is basically just a land that we can play early if we need land, but if we get it later in the game, we're not stuck with a land. We have something we can pitch to Narset or Flamethrower Sonata and do 7 damage to anything we want. It doesn't matter that it's a spell that might be overcosted that we might not play. And then in the really late game, if we're up against control, there are opportunities to actually play these spells, to draw a bunch of cards, or to make a couple of 4/4s and protect our board. So like the versatility of a card like this, being able to be a land in the early game, but being able to count as that important high cost spell that we can discard to Flamethrower Sonata and Narset, or exile with Draconic Intervention or Torrent Sculptor, is incredibly important. Auto includes, super awesome in this deck. The last inclusion is Magma Opus. Now, originally I wanted to include 4 of these, but to be honest, Boon of the Wishgiver and the modal lands are just better, right? The modal lands can fill up our land slot. Boon of the Wishgiver is something that we can cycle for 1 and hit our land drops, which a lot of times is more valuable than having to basically cycle for 2 but not draw a card and instead get a treasure token, which is what we're doing with Magma Opus in the early game. So even though that is effective and it's something where turn 2, turn 3, we can discard Magma Opus to make a treasure so that on turn 4, we have our 4 lands and our treasure and we can drop a Goldspan Dragon. Like that can be really powerful. But I still think that cycling Boon of the Wishgiver and just getting into our lands is probably more important. So there may be a version of this deck in the future that goes up to 4 on Magma Opus and possibly utilizes some of the other cards, the big spells from Strixhaven that discard to make a treasure token. But for now, we're sticking with 4 Boon of the Wishgivers and 2 Magma Opuses. And if we get this late in the game and we can cast it, it's an absolute blowout. It's 8 mana, instant, deals 4 damage as you choose divided among any number of targets. You can tap 2 target permanents, including lands, which is important, and then make a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token and draw 2 cards. So it's just absolute gas in the late game. And if we have it early to mid game, like I said, we can just discard it to make a treasure, or we can discard it to our Flamethrower Sonata or Narset, or we can, and then when it's in the graveyard, we can exile it to Draconic Intervention or Torrent Sculptor. Like, we can do so much with Magma Opus. So be nice to find a way to fit 2 more copies, but the curve's really tight here. You know, the cards are really tight. Everything in it is so much value, but the deck is nutty, right? We've got in our land base 4 Raugrin Triomes, 4 Needleverge Pathways, 4 Temple of Epiphanies, and 4 Riverglide Pathways. And that's essentially the deck. So we've been playing it in standard, and like the last 10 games have just been a win streak. Before we added Boon of the Wishgiver, it was a little tough, but once we added Boon of the Wishgiver in and we were able to more consistently make our land drops in the early game, like the deck's just been on fire and doing insane stuff. So the last little bits here in the sideboard is we've got 4 Test of Talents, and then we've got 4 Doomscar. Now, this is for best of 3 only, obviously. The first 7 cards in our sideboard are Keruga and the 6 Lessons. But the Doomscars come in and we take out 4 counterspells whenever we're up against a really aggressive deck that isn't control. And then the Test of Talents come in and we take out some of the creature removal whenever we're up against a control deck. And Test of Talents in particular is, I think, probably meta-defining, right? Test of Talents single-handedly destroys Sultai Ultimatum, which is a huge deck right now. It also really helps with Rogues, which is another big deck right now, because Test of Talents is a 2-mana instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell, search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that spell and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. So the reason this is so OP against Sultai Ultimatum or even Rogues is because both of those decks have late game spells that just make them go completely over the top and then you can't catch up. And this not only stops that spell, but it also forces them to commit their turn to playing it so that they can't play anything else. So there's a similar card in black, right? Where you can play it as a sorcery for 3 mana and then you name any card and search their deck and their hand for all copies of that card and get rid of it. The problem with that card is its sorcery speed. So they get to untap right after you play it and still play something else that's bomby. What's great about Test of Talents is Sultai Ultimatum decks have to commit 7 mana, play the ultimatum, and then you Test of Talents it, so not only are all of their ultimatums gone, but their turn was wasted, and then you get to untap and get a whole nother turn before you have to worry about dealing with maybe the other bomb they still have left in their hand, like a Tybalt or something. So, incredible blowout against Sultai Ultimatum, absolutely evens the odds, and then also against like Rogues, you can hit there into the story, which a lot of times that's all you need to do. Rogues is really good at leveraging tempo and getting in there, but once they get to that point where they're just about out of gas, if they don't hit that into the story, they kind of just peter out. So if you can just stop that into the story and then take all the into the stories out of their deck, it's incredibly overpowered. And you can just then gain card advantage over them and manage to kill them before they can get rid of the rest of your deck with milling or before they kill you or whatever. So Test of Talents, probably the best sideboard card to come out of Strixhaven and is absolutely going to turn the meta on its head. I expect to see Sultai Ultimatum decks go way down, and to an extent I expect to see Rogue decks go way down in how often they're played on the ladder. So this is the deck. I think it's pretty crazy. It's the first deck that I really put everything into for Strixhaven, but we've got a bunch more on the way. Anyway, let's jump into the games. Here we go. Lunar Requiem. Apparently they really like Witherbloom. Let's see if we can make them regret that choice. We'll keep this. This looks decent. We have plenty of land. We have Stomp on turn 2. A second Draconic Intervention. I don't think we need that. We're going to bottom it. We need a Flamethrower Sonata or a Narset so that we can get our big things into the graveyard. So that's kind of where we're at right now. All right, we'll play this on white, and we'll stomp this dude now before you can get value off of it. he's got the Arch. So now the question is, do we just play our Bonecrusher Giant, or do we divide by 0 the Arch? I think we play the Giant. I'm not in a rush to use the divide by 0, although it would be nice to find a lesson that we can pitch. Yeah, that seems good. Get rid of the Mortality Spear. We are going to scry, and then we're going to hold up divide by 0. There may be something better for us to target on his turn. Get rid of the land. So we're going to pass a turn. We're digging for Narset, basically. Or Flamethrower Sonata. Both will be ways for us to get this Seagate Restoration into our graveyard, and then use it with Draconic Intervention. And I think we can just completely take over the game if we can do that. Since this costs the most, that's what we're going to divide by 0. Basically makes him waste an entire turn replaying it. And then we can get... Well, we're going to Draconic Intervention anyway, probably. So it might make the most sense to... We also have plenty of land, so we don't need to play Seagate Restoration as a land. I think we're going to grab Reduce to Memory. We're not going to use it yet. But if we need to use it, it's there. Which is nice. Actually, maybe we do use it now. So that he can't learn. Nah, I don't think that's necessary. We're just going to do that and pass the turn. Mire Triton. This is becoming increasingly difficult. We're not really drawing what we need. We'll play this on blue. Do we just play the Keruga? No, it seems bad. We're going to Draconic Intervention, right? Well, I guess we could do the first one for 3 with the divide by 0. Wipe everything but the defender and then swing with the Keruga. That's probably good. We're just going to do that. It's slightly wasteful that we don't get to draw any cards off of it, but I think it puts the most pressure on the opponent. And leaves us up on value when we do that first Draconic Intervention. Search for Blex. Good card. How much life are you spending? Interesting. That was a lot. That was certainly a lot. The problem is that's like his entire turn, right? That's his entire turn. So we're just gonna swing with the dragon, I think. We want to dare him to commit more to the board so that we can hit more with the Draconic Intervention. So by holding back the Keruga and swinging in with the Goldspan Dragon, we're sort of able to do that. Alright, let's play this tapped. End the turn. It's not quite worth it to reduce to memory yet. I kind of want to save that for something particularly nasty. Like maybe Silver Smoke Ghouls, just because he can get them back. Although, in this particular instance, I think just slamming Draconic Intervention is pretty powerful. We'll be left with what? A 5/1 Keruga. Swing in for 9. He's going to take it all and go to 3. Gain 1 at the end of turn. We will foretell the Sot coming. And then pass the turn. Probably going to actually use the Seagate Restoration. We're probably also going to counterspell something this turn. He's got a lot of mana, and he needs to make a big play to try and get back in the game. So if we can stop that big play, we're all set. Yeah, like that one. That seems pretty good. That seems pretty good. Counterspell that. Plays another wall. So he's going to have to block. I don't know why he gained a life on his turn. He could have blocked with it and then gained the life. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. Except that if I have removal, spot removal, then he's just out of luck. Which I do. And I'm going to use it right now. Aw, he didn't let me. He didn't let me. That's fine. That was taking too long. Good games. Snoozin'. Snoozin' or losin'. Shakazula. That's a name. That is in fact a name. We can keep this. We don't have as much removal as I would like for the early game. But it should be fine. Divide by 0 can always bounce a permanent if we need to. And then we can probably find a lesson that can deal with a threat. Seems fine. We don't have any white for Narset. We need to keep that in mind. Solving problems. First 4 turns of this deck is literally just solving problems. Normally I would bottom that for another land. But I think in this instance it's really going to help us curve out properly. So I'm going for it. Pass the turn, we'll hold up Stomp. He is playing a Yorion deck, so we probably don't need it. Actually, probably would have been better to just hold up, or rather foretell saw it coming. That's okay. That's okay. We'll do it this way. We either start getting in there, or we get rid of a counterspell. No counterspell. So we either start getting in there, or we get rid of some removal. But even then he's taken 2, right? And if he doesn't have removal for the dragon because of it, we can just really start going to town. Alright, so 3 blue. Swing. I mean, we'll just keep swinging and holding up counterspells at this point. We've got 2 counterspells in our hand. We'll do that. We'll still take 2. We'll take another 4 here. And if we get lucky and top deck a land, he'll use his mana here to kill Bonecrusher Giant, probably with a Binding the Old Gods. No, he's playing a Seeker's Chariot. Interesting. So he can block with the 4/4 if he wants. So many options. If we Draconic Intervention for 3, he can activate the Chariot first. Same thing with Mythos. I think I like this one first. Wait, no. Cancel. Mythos. Because the other one will kill our giant. So he turns on the chariot. And then we trade with the chariot, or we just make him waste one of his removal spells by not attacking. That's probably better. Chances are pretty slim, I think, that he's going to play more creatures to activate it next turn. Which means we're going to force him to use a removal spell on Bonecrusher Giant, which also forces him to go to 10. And then we still are in a position where we might be lucky and draw into a land in order to play Goldspan Dragon. Man, we might not even have to lose our Bonecrusher Giant here. No, he's going to play the land, right? He's going to play the land, and then he's going to, what, Heartless Act it and go to 10? Or something like that. Nope. Wow. Well, I'll take it. We'll smash here. We'll end the turn. If he tries to play an ultimatum, we will divide by 0 it. I don't know if we'll be able to deal with it next turn. But we can definitely deal with it this turn. Alrund's Epiphany? No. No. What do we do? What do we do? We have 4 mana. I guess we just grab Teachings, even though we don't need it yet. Ah, perfect. Seagate Reborn. Slam the Goldspan Dragon. Swing in and win. Good game. 1 land. But we do get to scry, and we get to cycle a Boon. And we have a ton of cheap stuff. But we're on the play. I think we chance it. It's super risky. But the fact that we only need to get to 2 in order to like stall out with Flamethrower Sonata and Stomp, and we get a scry, and we get to cycle Boon. You know what? I'm gonna keep the Temple. Because we can toss another Temple and we can cycle the Boon. And then we should be fine. So let's scry. Let's put the Goldspan Dragon 1 down. Let's pass the turn. Give me more land. Pass. Alright, it looks like he's playing control. Should be fine. We're getting our land. Do we need to make a 3-drop? If we want to counterspell, we do. I don't think we need to counterspell anything this soon. I think we just play the Triome. Pass the turn. On second thought, I probably should have foretold saw it coming. It is what it is. Stomp. We'll play the Bonecrusher Giant. See if we can eat his counterspell. Nope. Thought Thief. He is playing rogues. It is not control. Let's go Stompy Stompy on his face. I like that idea. Teferi's Tutelage. No, 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 good sir. No, no, no. We are going to play Some shenanigans is what we're gonna do. All of the shenanigans. Are you ready for the shenanigans? Torrent Sculptor. We're gonna exile Seagate Restoration, put 4 counters on it. Swing for 4. Bring the race. Bring the race, rogues. You're not on top anymore. You think you're still on top? This is Strixhaven. This is Strixhaven season, baby. Oh, what's the matter? You have a Blood Chief's Thirst, but you can't target the Torrent Sculptor? Just kill the Bonecrusher, it's fine. Take 2. Take 2. We'll Temple. We'll leave that on top because we want to make him mill it for us. We're going to swing. We're going to swing because we have counter spells. Let me think. Divide by 0 doesn't do much here. So we're just gonna saw it coming. If he's got the counter spell, that's fine. Right? It uses up his whole turn. He's still only able to block 1 dude. And we get through for 4. So I mean, the drown in the lock is gone. I feel good about it. We're getting ready to Goldspan Dragon. If the drown's gone, then he probably just has like a Heartless Act or a piece of removal in his hand. Which means Goldspan Dragon is a good play here. Because if he targets it, we get the 2. We don't have any way to efficiently use that 2 yet, do we? Maybe we just try to... Yeah, let's slam the Goldspan Dragon. It's the most expensive thing. So we're more likely to play 2 spells in the same turn. Next turn or the turn after. If we keep our cheaper stuff. Does he have another Thieves Guild Enforcer? No, he's going to make a 1/1. He's going to block it with the 1/1. I think that's fine. He's running out of gas. We're going to try to Torrent Sculptor, I think. Yeah, he's out of mana. We'll absolutely Torrent Sculptor. If we get lucky. Alright, we'll go white. Mythos. We could go 3 and 2. Lock it down. That seems not as good. Let's swing. That's what I was hoping for. So now we can kill it with Mythos. And if it somehow survives, it'll be locked down. Oh, the last card was a Drown in the Lock. Wow. Well, we're going to Flamethrower Sonata the Thought Thief. We're going to discard Draconic Intervention. Bonecrusher Giant will be back. I think we can kill him before he can mill us 20 cards. We'll see. We shall see. He's definitely doing a lot of work with Teferi's tutelage and Teferi, which I guess makes sense. Let's do this. Let's divide by 0 the Ruin Crab. Then we'll find... What can we freaking kill this guy with? 2, 3... If we had another white, unfortunately the auto tapper tapped our white. That's a bummer. Might cost us. Guess we'll just grab Reduce to Memory. We'll just do that.
Ideas like seconds.
Fortunately, we have to get rid of Teferi, because the combination with the tutelage is just going to destroy us. Let's get another giant onto the field. Next turn, we can reduce to memory the tutelage after we attack. Very important, after we attack. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. Get out of here. Get out of here. One turn to lethal. If he draws a card, mills us 2, we go to 10. If he gets into the story and draws 4, he mills us 8 more and we go to 2. Which means we draw 1 on our turn. He would need to mill us 2 more cards, and he would have 2 to 3 mana and 4 cards in his hand to do it. Chances of him being able to do that, I think, are just too high. But he has to top deck the end of the story, right? Chances of that, I think, are pretty slim. Yeah. We're gonna hold. I could have gotten rid of the tutelage. Yeah, there we go. It's actually a hard decision. If he draws into the story, he probably just beats me right then and there, so... I had to think hard about it. The problem is, if I had taken the turn to reduce to memory the tutelage and turn it into a creature, that means I can't attack for lethal next turn. I get him to 2, right? He blocks and kills my other giant, which means he's got 2 turns to mill me out instead of 1. So it really comes down to, like, what's more likely, that he draws into the story, or that over the course of 2 turns he naturally mills me 4 from drawing. Well, I guess he wouldn't be able to hit me for another 2. I would rather have him have to top deck just the right card, or he's dead. I think that's just better. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. We are pushing hard for that 1,000 subscriber mark, so please consider subscribing. Hit that button. There's a circle in the middle over there. Hit that. Subscribe. Tell all your friends to do it. Thank you. Also, give this video a like so more people can see it. If you'd like more PlayStation and console game coverage, we've got that down below. And if you'd like more Magic the Gathering coverage, there's more of that somewhere off over that way. Do all the things.